we know Tomás Morín as a poet, and this is his most recent. And we even talked about your beautiful cover in class in terms of visual grammar and how text and image convey sensibilities. This is a fabulous book. Machete is your most recent poetry collection, but we're actually hosting you on the cusp of publication related to your first prose book, right?
Designed by the same person, the covers.
Really? Oh, I love it. Let me count them, please. I have so much to say to you on a personal note about this book. And some of it I can say after your reading. It's really, really beautiful. Thanks for making it. Oh,
yeah,
man.
thank you.
So welcome everyone to the very, very last of the season, the grand finale of Distinguished Visiting Writers with our small core crew of devoted listeners today on the last day of classes. We have Tomás Morín here today, and he is the author of the poetry collection Machete that was published last year, and the brand new memoir out from University of Nebraska. His first collection of poetry, A Larger Country, was the winner of American Poetry Review's Honigman Prize. And that is across the board, everyone, for poets. Like, you could read all those prize books and they're great. Don't you think, Tomás?
Oh, yeah. They're absolutely fantastic.
Just read all of those. Yeah. And runner-up for the Penn Joyce Osterweil Award. Also really crazy good. Patient Zero, his second poetry collection, was described by Publishers Weekly in a starred review as striking in capturing everyday actions with startling musical wit. And with Marie L'Espérance, he co-edited Coming Close, 40 Essays on Philip Levine, a book that explores the art and value of Philip Levine's 5 decades of teaching, mentor to
can you imagine
friend,
that?
Family for You, and then you put an anthology and book of essays together about him. That's like such a good tribute, right? Yeah. And in his work as a translator, Tomás translated Pablo Neruda's visionary The Heights of Machu Picchu, as well as Luisa Pardo and Gabino Rodriguez's libretto Pancho Villa from A Safe Distance, a magisterial opera composed by Graham Reynolds. So we have a multifaceted talent with us today, a new father, a wonderful teacher and friend to many. Let's welcome Tomás. Yay.
Hey. Thank you, Trini, for that wonderful intro, and thank you all of you for, showing up on the last day. I know if I were in your shoes, I'd probably have like the Zoom on my phone, and I'd be driving somewhere, like away, to get away, but still listening. So yeah, I appreciate it. Knowing that it was the last day, I brought a variety of things to read from. I'll read a little bit from the memoir, but I also want to just read a little bit from some books that I'm currently reading that are really one is a reread that I've reread many times, and then others are new books by friends, and then a book by an author who's new to me, and just give you a variety of things, because I feel like oftentimes when we present our work, it's so carefully curated, and I feel like social media is actually an extension of the author. The author visit, those talks where you go up and like you're showing up as your author self, and then you leave as your self, and it's a sort of like very narrow kind of slice of a life, right? So I thought, maybe we could, I could make things a little messier, and a little broader. So I'm going to start by reading to you from this book that just came out on the 23rd, I think, 24th. It's very new. And one thing I love about it is how skinny it is. It's like skinny and tall. I remember there used to be, I remember I came across some poetry books, I think put out by Athenaeum. It came out like in the 60s and the 70s. That would sometimes have this really skinny approach. But Victoria Chang did this really interesting thing where she set herself the exercise of, she pulled like 4 or 5 different Japanese forms that all fall under the umbrella of the waka poems. And they're all kind of, I'd call them like the husky cousins of the haiku. I don't think any of them are like longer than 6 lines, maybe 7 lines tops, but it's a combination of, you know, instead of 575, it's 57755 and so forth in different combinations. So she would pull a form at random, and then she would open up a W.S. Merwin book. I think it was The Compass Flower, and she would pick a title from one of his poems, and then start with that title as her own title, and then write a poem in that particular form. So her poems are both looking forward and looking backward at the same time. And you don't have to know the Merwin poems to get anything out of them. Yeah, so it resulted in this book where you can see like a lot of pages, it has 2, you know, they have 2 poems on there instead of the typical just 1 poem per page. So I'm just going to read a few of them. I'll just open to a random page. The Night Plums. The night plums ignore everything. They only grow while enclosed. In that way, we are just like plums. We don't know who is eating us. Division. There are holes in earth. Our dead dig into soil. Their fingers touch. Dead hands grabbing other hands. How did they forgive each other? Completion. I'm done living. Wanting accelerates time. When I lift the soft grass up, I see you are bald. So I go back to living. But when I return, it's a different season. The woods are now a mall. My children have gray hair. And the last one, the first year. The year after death is full of stretching, where things pull so hard your bones break, because they were never bones, were always solitude. Yeah, so The Trees Witness Everything by Victoria Chang. Really, really good book. So this is from the memoir. I come from a really small town in South Texas, and as usually happens in really small towns, nicknames are a really, really important thing, really part of the culture, and you know, you can't really give yourself a nickname. So this is about the sort of like the tradition of nicknames in my town. On names. When I was growing up, you could probably go in many neighborhoods where people were up to no good in the coastal Bend area and mention El Indio. And if someone didn't know him, they knew someone who did. As far as nicknames go, Indio and Chief are pretty good. What guy wouldn't want to be called Chief? In Mathis, Texas, many people had nicknames. The one catch was that you couldn't pick your own. If you tried, you'd be ignored and get called by whatever nickname your body suggested. Or worse, some interesting lie about you that was making the rounds. One guy everyone called Tick. He was short, overweight, and had the kind of plump, happy face you get after gorging on the neighbor's dog. Another guy was nicknamed Rana because he had a voice so raspy it reminded you of a frog croaking. Had Tom Waits been from Mathis, Rana would have had competition for his name. A group of people could also be given a nickname. Someone walking down the road one day looked in a yard where kids were crawling in a tree like monkeys. That was all it took for those brothers and sisters to be called Los Changos. A pair of brothers from another family were Los Calcetines after someone saw them playing outside as children with nothing on their feet but long socks. A nickname didn't always end with the person it was given to. When a man named La Víbora had children, it seemed like the most natural thing to call all of his kids snakes too. In conversation, that family was then known as Las Víboras. If you had been nicknamed La Paca because your long torso with no curves reminded people of a rectangular hay bale, then when you had children who inherited the shape of your body, of course, everyone was going to call your kids Las Paquitas. Physical disabilities were not out of bounds. If I had had a bum leg I dragged behind me, I might have been nicknamed Escoba because of the sweeping motion my leg made. A boy who was born mute was called Mudo. A man who was my father's age was El Columpio, after his legs that had been twisted by polio made him swing his arms and legs when he walked. While calling someone a swing sounds cruel, he smiled when I saw someone yell, Columpio. And why wouldn't he smile when having a nickname meant you belonged? Besides, who wouldn't want people to say your name and think of kids laughing as they swung from the earth to the sky like pendulums of joy? There's I can find it. There's a poem in this book, "The Mercy" by Philip Levine, that I return to over and over. It's just one of those poems where it never. I feel like every time I read it, as the years go by, I find something new and something different, and it speaks to me in different ways. The Mercy. The ship that took my mother to Ellis Island 83 years ago was named the Mercy. She remembers trying to eat a banana without first peeling it and seeing her first orange in the hands of a young Scot, a seaman who gave her a bite and wiped her mouth for her with a red bandana and taught her the word orange, saying it patiently over and over. A long autumn voyage, the days darkening with the black waters calming as night came on. Then nothing as far as her eyes could see, and space without limit rushing off to the corners of creation. She prayed in Russian and Yiddish to find her family in New York, prayers unheard or misunderstood, or perhaps ignored by all the powers that swept the waves of darkness before she woke, that kept the Mercy afloat while smallpox raged among the passengers and crew, until the dead were buried at sea with strange prayers in a tongue she could not fathom. The Mercy I read on the yellowing pages of a book I located in a windowless room of the library on 42nd Street, sat 31 days offshore in quarantine before the passengers disembarked. There a story ends. Other ships arrived, Tancred out of Glasgow, the Neptune registered as Danish, Umberto IV. The list goes on for pages. November gives way to winter. The sea pounds this alien shore. Italian miners from Piemonte dig under towns in western Pennsylvania, only to rediscover the same nightmare they left at home. A 9-year-old girl travels all night by train with one suitcase and an orange. She learns that mercy is something you can eat again and again while the juice spills over your chin. You can wipe it away with the back of your hands, and you can never get enough. One of the things that I write about in Let Me Count the Ways is my struggles with mental illness, in particular obsessive compulsive disorder, and hence the title, Let Me Count the Ways. So this is a poem called Symmetry. Comfy socks, phone near where I'll sit, a glass of water. My apartment is still. When I choose one of the 25 books I'm currently reading, I think, what a weirdo. And then, yes, but a weirdo who is also the counter of lines, the marker of beginnings and endings, an oldest son and a middle child, whose nose is allergic to the air and the trees in all seasons, the devourer of apples and the hater of peaches, a bastard who is given 3 chances at a father, the enemy of tomatoes and raw fish and milk, the stomach grumbling behind you, the patron of cats, both feral and not, the disciple of the tigress that suckles the orphaned piglet. A few slight adjustments, and the parallel lines that my books, shoes, phone, couch, and pillows send out away from themselves are in harmony with the lines of the windows, counter, walls, floors, and doors. I am a spider in the center of a perfect web. I am hungry, always hungry, but I do not know for what. I put my feet on the ottoman and open Kafka's The Blue Octavo notebooks. My cat stretches her black arm with a white glove on the end of it across my stomach. Her other arm also looks like it has a white glove. Her name is Lindsay, and she is black with white. It looks like she's wearing orange shorts with high white socks. Cat books call her a tortoiseshell, although just like other cats that look like her, she does not resemble a tortoise, or a turtle for that matter. Like a tortoise, she is feisty and will snap at you if you place your hand in front of her face, though I suppose anything would. For 2 years, starting in 1917, instead of writing in his usual diaries, Kafka took to writing in octavo-sized notebooks. He filled 8 of these smaller notebooks with parts of stories, as well as his thoughts on the hope and suffering we encounter between our birth and death. Until I jump to another book, my mind is at rest. No counting, just drinking the words someone poured onto a page. I am tired, so tired. The pages of the book are dark because the book is in my right hand and its cover faces away from the dark kitchen toward the window. When I grow tired and switch hands, the sunlight from the window makes the words sharper. Lindsay looks at me and blinks slowly. I've read that when one cat does this to another, it means, I love you. What can it mean for me? And if a blink of an eye can mean a whole sentence, what have I been saying to the world all my life? It would be years before Lindsay learned to accept love as easily as she gave it. I'm not even afraid to pet her when she sleeps beside me anymore, even though she is nearly invisible in the dark. Her previous owner said Lindsay had had 2 kittens when she was young. One was given away and the other was kept. Her son, named Tiger, and Oscar, another cat they lived with, bullied her at mealtime. Even after she had enough and left, Oscar came around to fight with her. He didn't know she had a family now. She was no longer just a cat named after the street she lived on, but Lindsay Ann Lou Sticktail Morín. She hovers near my desk while I type this. I check the clock. It's 4:23 p.m. She likes to eat dinner at 4:30 p.m. Like me, she dislikes daylight savings because it throws our routines off. I ask her to wait and I keep typing. She climbs the stairs to the couch and heads toward my desk. I click Save As. I grab her wet food from the refrigerator. 4 seconds in the microwave and stir. Arthritis doesn't keep her from trotting after me. I tap the white ceramic bowl that has always been her dinner bell. I'm positive she's been deaf for over a year, yet I can't help but ring it, just in case. She gobbles her food as if it is the last time she will ever eat. Once she has finished, I wipe her runny nose, rinse the bowl, and return here. She's purring because she was hungry, and now she is not. This year, she turned 19. I met her when she was 3 or 4 and walked up to me in a parking lot. While she was rubbing my legs, I stroked her back. She wheeled and tried to scratch me. Surprised, I watched her run off. We repeated this scene the next few months before she tried moving into our apartment. Since she and our cat didn't get along, we tried everything to keep her out. We shook plastic bags to scare her and even sprayed her with water. Nothing worked. A few months later, when she scratched her owner for trying to carry her home, we knew then she had chosen us, had marked the moment in blood, and was ours. Though the sun is low, what little is left of it still makes it easier to see now the shapes of the letters Kafka strung together to write. One can disintegrate the world by means of very strong light. For weak eyes, the world becomes solid. For still weaker eyes, it seems to develop fists. For eyes weaker still, it becomes shamefaced and smashes anyone who dares to gaze upon it. The world demands to be seen, gets angry when it isn't. When the moon is out tonight, it won't matter which hand I hold my book in. The darkness of my kitchen will be the same as the darkness outside. The only difference will be that I know where all the sharp objects sleep in one. As for the other, who can say? Thank you. This book also just came out called Proceed to Checkout by one of my favorite poets and dear friend, Alan Shapiro. And he has this really powerful poem in here called Zoom. It's very, very of our time. In the hospice where you died, a lot of money was spent to make the place conform to someone's algorithm of a home. Shag carpeted lobby, wood paneled elevator, particle board furniture with shrink wrap thin mahogany veneer, faux marble linoleum tiles. There were paintings of chickens in a barnyard on the walls of every room. The homier they made it, the more clinical it felt. You, of course, were out of it by then. The ersatz hominess was for the living, not the almost dead. On the rare occasions when you woke and tried to talk, I could only hear enough of what you murmured to know how far away you were from anything I knew. Alone in a remoteness that today seems almost familiar, though no less remote, like hospice, you might say, by another name. My face isolated in a square stacked with the squares of friends and family inside the screen-sized square our separate boxes make together. Boxes talking box to box, as in a bar or restaurant, face to face, as in a pre-posthumous world of host and game show faces, mummified to paste, to pasty smiles of dead celebrities still quipping, "How many balls on a pool table?" Depends on how many men are playing pool. I think I hear you in our edgy laughter, as if we'd won a one-way ticket to a last resort, a Club Med of an island rendezvous, a hidden, herded horde of eye germs doing anything to keep alive and still be seen and heard. Funny how signing off, no matter who I wave to, it's you I always see wave back at me. The two of us together once again in a lost dimension, as if we're both on ship and shore, stranded departing, waving till the square goes mute and blackens, and the room with just myself inside it feels so unreal. I'm virtually nowhere where you are. And I thought I would end on um, a funny note. Alan Shapiro is a very funny poet, although his last couple books have gotten a little darker, like a lot of people's work has gotten a little darker in the last few years. So this is a poet who is not a poet. Listen to me. This is a writer, a fiction writer who is new to me, but not new to others. His most recent book, Interior Chinatown, won the National Book Award last year, I think. Charles Yu. So whatever happens, one of the things I've always done is when I find a writer that I think, oh wow, like I'm really digging what they're into, I'll find out what their first book is, and then I'll get their second book and their third, and then I'll read them forward chronologically. So this is the first book by Charles Yu called Third Class Superhero. And I'm just going to read just a little bit from the very beginning of the first short story in here, the title story. Third Class Superhero. Got the letter today, and guess what? Still not a superhero. Dear applicant, not a good sign. The number of qualified candidates this year, blah, blah, far exceeded the number of available blah. I scanned the list of people who did make it. A lot of them graduated with me. It's the usual assortment of the strong and beautiful. About half are fireball shooters. A few are ice makers. Half a dozen telepaths, empaths, a couple of brutes, a shapeshifter, a few big brains. One thing they all have in common is that every single one of them can fly. I can't fly. I can't do much. On the other hand, it's not like I'm asking for a lot. I don't need to be an all-star. I just want a suit and a cape, steady work, a paycheck that covers groceries, decent health insurance, but I'll have to wait another year. At least I have my good guy card for now. Every morning when I open my eyes, I think the same four thoughts. 1, I am not a superhero. 2, I have to go to work. 3, if I didn't have to work, I could be a superhero. 4, if I were a superhero, I wouldn't have to work. I was temping for a while to keep my afternoons free in case I got calls for tryouts, but those dried up, and I needed to get a regular job for dental and vision. Now I'm a records clerk for a big midtown law firm. I like it because I don't have to talk to anyone or explain myself if I'm missing for a few hours. I just say I was lost in the stacks. People at work don't know I'm moonlighting. They think I'm an actor. Part of the problem is my name, Moisture Man. Doesn't exactly strike fear into the hearts of the wicked. For a few months last year, I tried to get people to call me Atmosphero. A few people did it to be nice, but it didn't stick. I think the problem was too many syllables. Shortening it to Atmos doesn't work either, because there's a physicist up in Seattle named Atomos, who solves science crimes with a group that calls itself the Nucleus. The registrar says if I use too similar a name, I could be sued for infringement. She suggested the name Sphero, but that's just plain wrong. Makes me sound like a force field guy. And anyway, O endings are usually for villains. So I'm stuck with Moisture Man. A couple of years ago, I listed myself in the phone book, which was a mistake because you can imagine the crank calls I get. My power, if you can call it that, and I don't think you can, is that I'm able to take about 2 gallons of water from the moisture in the air and shoot it in a stream or a gentle mist. Or a ball, which is useful for water balloon fights, but not all that helpful when trying to stop carnage and mayhem from robbing a bank. For years, I was on a self-improvement kick. I read all the books and listened to tapes. I ordered everything there was to order by mail, studied physics, how the big brains can change gravitational constants. I read history, I learned theory, the balance of good and evil, stuff like that. Still doesn't change the fact that I'm minor, not even minor, a sideshow, a human water fountain. I did some time in therapy. Turns out I have a self-destructive impulse and slight megalomania. I didn't need to pay for 60 hours of analysis to find that out. I still go to the gym, but I'm getting old and I can only do so much. I read every word of Heroics for Dummies, $24.99, written by someone with an MBA. The quick bullet point tip sheet at the back of the book tells me to, quote, focus on my strengths, end quote, and rely on others when it comes to my weaknesses. That's helpful. I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. He's so great. What a cool selection you chose to read and share today too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Nice.
You know, I was saying at the beginning about how, you know, they feel so curated. It wasn't until I started reading the beginning of that short story that in my mind, I saw the connection between like the Phil Levine poem with the naming, right? The naming of oranges, and then my selection on names, you know, and then his story here with the names. I'm like, oh, great. They're going to think that I actually did like a super curated reading when I was just pulling stuff at random.
Oh, that's so funny. And I was curating, I thought the curation was thematic. There's my prose brain. You know, you're you're the wordsmith too, so you were thinking
Yeah.
names, right? And
I just grabbed stuff off the shelf.
exactly.
Grabbed stuff off the shelf and then just started, reading at random.
It always, our brains are looking for connection and meaning all the time, and we will find it no matter what is being placed in front of us, right? And what we're listening to.
Absolutely.
Well, I have lots I can say to keep the conversation going, but I'd love to hear from any of you too. What would we like to ask Tomás about? Victoria Chang, Alan Shapiro, Charles Yu, his own new memoir, anything about anything related to writing life. What are we curious about?
Perhaps you could tell me a little bit about yourselves, where you are in your education, what sorts of things you're writing.
Hi, I had a question, but also hi, I'm Archie. Wonderful writing and reading today.
Thank you, Archie.
I was just wondering because, a lot of our creative processes were disrupted during COVID. I just want to know what were some things that you found useful to keep your creative process alive and thriving during such a time.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like pre-COVID, what I would usually do whenever I would kind of sit in I don't like the term dry spell, because that makes it sound like something's happening that's not supposed to be happening, like some sort of drought. But like for me, writing is when the stuff is coming out and I'm being creative and composing new work. And then the gaps in between where there's silence, like that's when I do a lot of reading. And the reading is like planting seeds. It's like I've already harvested the crops. It's time to turn the earth, plant seeds, and then just wait for things to grow. So like it just so happened that the pandemic has overlapped with, like for me, like it's overlapped with that season of planting, of planting the seeds. I did write a little bit, but what helped push me there was selling the poetry book. And so Machete originally, before my editor took it, it had a long 20-page prose translation in the middle of it. Mm. And she felt like it wasn't working. Like her experience as a reader was, like she said, I felt like I couldn't wait to finish it so that I could get back to the poems on the other side.
Oh, interesting.
So she was like, if you would be open to taking it out, which would then make the book too short, because that's like 20 pages, gone. But then write something else to fill that space. I'd love to work with you on this book. So I took it out and I ended up writing 2 10-page poems, and then like 1 2-pager or 1 3-pager, which was the 3-pager is specifically about the pandemic and being a new parent, within in the pandemic. But that pandemic poem and the 2 10-pagers, they felt like assignments, and they felt like assignments in the sense that they had a little more urgency like behind them, so it wasn't my usual where I'm just kind of like bumbling along in the world, waiting to be inspired, and then I'm inspired, and then I sit down and and I write something, or I take notes for something. So like from the outside, people looking in, they're like, wow, you published 2 books like during the pandemic, one last year, one this year. Like, how are you so productive? Well, like the memoir, I started it like 6 years ago, and I sold it right at the beginning of the pandemic. And then within a month later, I sold the poetry collection. So really the main work that I did on those books was just edits and revising, and getting them ready in the production schedule, and, covers and all that stuff is fun. Like I find it fun. But I've had friends who have tried different things, like like writing a poem a day and sharing, sharing it with each other. And I think one thing I've noticed a lot talking to other writer friends is that I think a lot of collaborations are going to come out of this time in the pandemic. I have a couple of collaborative writing projects that I'm going to start working on this year. Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it really hit home how precious time is, in particular time with each other. And it's one thing to publish a book on your own, you've done that, but then like, what kind of fun can you have with your friends? What can you write together? What can you collaborate on? So yeah, so in a way I've continued to feel engaged with my creative process. And I have probably ideas for like at least 8 or 9 poems that I haven't started to write yet. But I have notes, I have notes and titles and first lines for them. And as soon as this semester is over, which is this week, then I'll be sitting down with them and, working on them.
Oh, that's right. You said you write in the summers since you're, yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
Christina, who's a colleague of mine, and she's here today, Christina Perez, and also, Crystal. Hi, Crystal is my colleague too. And I think she writes a lot in the summer. Did you tell me that, Crystal, that you're a summer writer as well?
Yes, I can't seem to get any writing done during the academic year because teaching and grading and all of that. So summers is when I get writing done. Academic writing, I wish I had a more creative creativity in me. And actually maybe that could follow, that could segue into a question. What do you recommend for people who feel like they don't have like necessarily a creative vein, especially someone who like me that writes academic lingo and academic type of writing? Is there hope for us to transition? We read so much literature, but
right.
and write criticism, but like, is there, I know that there's people that do both, maybe you as well, but what advice could you have for us potential I don't know. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. What advice do you have for someone like me who feels like has no creative writing vein in me, but that has a little bit of a like a compulsion to express myself in ways that I'm not used to doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like a term that has in academic circles that started gaining some traction is public facing work, which I don't really like that term because I feel like all of our work is public facing or should be public facing. And I mean, what is non-public facing work? A diary, right? None of us are, whether we're academics or, creative writers or whatnot, we're not publishing our diaries. So it's all, public facing work. I think being able to explore different modes, I think is a really important thing. There's stuff that I've written about in my creative work that I've also been able to, creative work isn't even the right phrase, but that I've also been able to write about in in op-ed forms, in short essays, but from a different angle, a more personal angle. And that's been fun and interesting. Also entering the dialogue into these different, these different conversations from a more personal, vantage. And I mean, if there's one thing that, academic deans love is, hearing that you have something in the New York Times or the Atlantic Monthly, basically stuff, in places that that donors would recognize, right?
Yeah.
as opposed to, I don't know, like, Antioch Review. Like if I told my dean, hey, I had a poem in the Antioch Review, it's like, well, what is that? Versus, hey, I had an essay in the New York Times. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, let me write that down, and put that in the newsletter to donors.
Yep.
Yeah, so, but at the same time, it's like all of the publication stuff aside, so I had a piece in the Times for the first time last year. The level of engagement I got from people from my hometown, people I went to high school with, strangers, was really something I hadn't really experienced in terms of like nonfiction before. There's just something, it feels like there's an openness, like it invites conversation, in addition to inviting contemplation. And I feel like traditional academic discourse invites contemplation, but not necessarily conversation from like a lay audience. So I think it's important to speak to different circles, different groups. I think like different modes. Finding the mode that feels fun. And pushing in that direction. Yeah. What's your subject area? Like what do you write about?
I write Chicanx on Chicanx Lit, specifically popular genres like detective fiction, thrillers.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what
Do you know the work of Fernando Flores?
No,
Yeah, he just so he's a I won't say new novelist or a new fiction writer, but he's originally from the Rio Grande Valley. His third book called Valley-esque is about to come out. It's a collection of short stories. His second book, Tears of the Truffle Pig, a novel, which is kind of like Charles Yu in the sense that it's speculative. It's speculative fiction. He's like such an incredible writer. I think tomorrow is the launch date for the book of short stories, Valley-esque. Like I said, it's weird to call him like a new writer, but I think he's right on the verge of blowing up from like being well known among writer circles to bigger, like what's her name, Sandra Cisneros, like is a huge fan of his work, and but like wild imagination, like a really wild imagination, and just his work is filled with place in really interesting ways. And I hate the term magical realism, but I think people would probably put him in that camp. I always remember back to that. I can't remember where I read it. Maybe it was an interview somewhere where Garcia Marquez was talking about magical realism and how he's like, come down here, like, come to Colombia, and it's like you'll see that the things I write about, like they're not supernatural. Let's go to the countryside, and you'll see things that you would call back in the States magical realism, that it's just realism. Yeah. But no, he's a fantastic writer, and a dear friend. He lives here in Austin now.
Thank you so much for that. I'm gonna have to check him out. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know what I was thinking about, Tomás, when you were like the collaborative dialogic style of the reading that you gave, and what you were saying about absorbing and planting the seeds and that germinating mindset. I have a larger question that I'll frame in class, but for this, I was thinking about, in light of what Crystal was saying, because I know that feeling, Crystal. It's like we're trying to do our critical work, and it can be hard to like switch brain modes a lot of the time, because it could take a lot of like unstructured time. And Tomás, I was wondering if I'll try and think about how to narrow this down, but I was thinking about Philip Levine's style of language, like the piece you read about mercy, which thematically, like that's how I was thinking. Their whole reading was framed about those issues of mercy. And like you said about your cat, Lindsay, learning to accept love, right? Like those that moved across all the pieces. And that love can look, it can look in so many different ways. It can just be cubes on a screen, right? Like satirist Alan Shapiro's pointing out. But do you think there's something in there about like, can you say something about conversing with mentors and tributing mentors and like finding their styles, copying their styles, imitating their breaths, even if the ideas are different, right? Like I could hear you in that Levine poem, the way this like short staccatos with then like the long almost sentency lines, right? But your pieces are totally different, of course, you know, but like not being afraid of imitation, just owning it and like feeling that beauty of conversing with the books you love and authors you love.
Yeah, that's
to find that creative space, right?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest hurdles I find for my undergrads in like intro creative writing workshops is one, like disabusing them of the idea, the idea, preconceived ideas they have of what it means to be original.
Yes.
You know, and to really embrace like imitation as a practice for growth, as an artist, and also as a way to converse and with the past and be a part of a tradition and part of a conversation that preceded you and that will outlive you, you know. That's so hard for them because like their ideas of originality are very narrow and very rigid. Oftentimes, like I have to get on the really the ways in which I feel have been most successful is to get really granular with them. And oftentimes I end up resorting to, I feel like this is so cliche because I'm a dude, like I end up referring to metaphors that are either about sports or have to do with the body. I think dance is a sport also. So like I work that in sometimes. So I don't get called out in my evaluations. But what I tell them is, if you are a professional athlete, you've made it to the very top of your field. I'll ask them to think about things like film sessions. Like, what are film sessions for? And I'll tell them stories of like a certain professional athlete. Like, now I always started with, when I was a kid, when I was a child, if I would see a basketball game on TV, and there was one move that kept being replayed and replayed because it was just mind blowing. What did me and my friends do? As soon as the game was over, we'd go out to the backyard and we try to do the move.
Right.
Like
even though properly inspired, you're going to want to do that.
Right. Like, you would try to do it.
How you learn.
Right. And I said, if you take that up to the next level at the professional level where you're making a life out of this, you're going to be dissecting that move, the film of that move. Then you're going to go into a gym and you're going to practice that move over and over and over, probably even record yourself doing it, and then watch the film of that. And I said, and in between all of that, you're doing drills, right? You're doing passing drills, dribble drills, rebounding drills, all these drills. And I said, the thing about the drills is the game is not the drills. The game is all the muscle memory that you've built in your body by doing these moves over and over and over, so that when you sit down to write a poem or to write an essay, if you've been studying on a granular level, the writers that you admire, the artists that you admire, that stuff has gotten into, like, those skills, right? Those skills have gotten into your muscles. So the sorts of like writing drills that I have them do is I'll give them, depends on what level. Like if it's an advanced level workshop, I'll assign them a book of poems, let's say, and I'll say, okay, now take this book home and type up a fresh copy in Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
And often they're like, what? You
You're
know,
like,
this sounds like busy work. And I'm like, no, it's not busy work. You know, or I'll give them one poem and I'll say, type up 10 copies of this poem.
mhm.
You know, no cheating and doing copy and paste, because then you're cheating yourself.
You're figure drawing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, the other metaphor I give them is visual arts students going into a museum. You know, you see a Velasquez, you know, up on the wall, and you start drawing the feet of Christ, right? Page, and you have page after page after page of the feet of Christ.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing a study, right? You're doing a study of how this particular person did feet in this particular image, so that you can go and figure out how to do the feet that you're going to do in whatever, you know, whatever your project is. And I tell them, this is across the arts.
It is across the arts.
You know, this is
Across
how,
all excellence. It's
yes,
across scientific experiment and
yes,
setting up hypotheses to test. It's across
yes,
religious,
yeah,
spiritual practice. Yeah. Right.
yeah.
That's
So
why
then it starts sinking in, you know, and once they buy in and they start doing it, then you know, then they see it. But it really helps. One thing that really helps me is, and I started doing this a couple of years ago, was I would start off the workshops, especially the intro ones, with just sharing with them my process. I would share screen, and this was easier to do on Zoom, but you know, if it's a classroom that's wired, you know, with computers and everything, and screen, I can do it. But I would just go into my files and I would pull up the drafts for a particular poem that had been published. And first thing I would show them is like that there were 60 Word files in that folder that were the drafts for that poem.
Yeah.
And I would show them the dates so they could read the dates. Then we'd start with the first, you know, the first doc, maybe skip ahead to the 4th, you know, then the 10th, and the 11th, and then the 12th, and then like the 20th, and just show them like, one, that writing takes time, you
Yeah.
know, 2, it takes a lot of work, and that revision is writing.
Yeah.
You know, there's the sort of perfectly crystallized first draft, which is for me in my process feels like it's pure inspiration. You know, there's that thing, and then there's what I did with it over the next, you know, 59 drafts, and how those two moments complement one another. So yeah, doing those really granular exercises, like you said, you know, like the figure drawing, yeah, it really helps. And they seem to be really get into it once, you know, they break down whatever bad habits, you know, they had, or bad ideas about writing.
Wow. I love it. And there's more conversation to be had in class about that too, because now I'm remembering that feeling of when you are forming your own identity, that you need to figure out where you are, and you need to figure out why you're original, why you're writing, and what you need to say in the world, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like you're finding your subject position. So it's really hard to let go of that and not worry about that, you know, until you get to a
Yeah.
certain like level of identity, I feel like, or like at least a sense of one's identity, like even if it's going to shift your whole life, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
maybe we can talk about that more in class too, because I feel like too, there's something so important in your practice about, and it's coming through in this work, about the way you, in this passage, we're reading aloud about the process of reading as the calming state, where it would be like a rescue or a respite from the obsessive thoughts, where you can just focus, right?
Yeah.
And be in the moment. And the exercises that you're describing that kind of like force you to be in there, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of us experience that. And maybe we can think of some ways to share thoughts on that with the class in a little while.
Yeah. I would love
So
to.
cool. Yeah. Okay, Tomás, any other last questions before we sign into the other crew?
I had one real
Yeah.
quick.
Yes.
Yeah, Danny.
I heard you saying I believe it was The Trees Witness Everything by Victoria Chang.
Mhm.
I did have, and I was
Yes.
curious what else you're reading, like right now, like anything that's like got your attention, or even recent, like it's just knocked your hair back. You can't.
Right now I'm reading the memoir, The Perfect Sound by Garrett Hongo. Hongo. He's a poet and memoirist. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And for anyone who is an audiophile and who loves like really like nerding out on audio, like that's the book for you. Yeah, it's really fantastic. I'm listening to the audiobook of it. I think I have like 3 hours left, and I've been taking my time with it because it's just full of so much rich detail. Yeah, it's a really fabulous book.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're
So
welcome.
great. He's so funny and
He is.
he's such a godfather.
He is. Yeah. Yeah.
Hawaiian godfather. Oh my gosh. Okay. Anything else? We have more time. Let's go. Oh, Tomás, I need to send you the link. I will do that right now privately, but let's say thank you here. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you in class in a moment.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you everyone for having me, for listening, and the wonderful conversation.
Thanks.